Hi, everybody. Helen from Cadence here. Excited to introduce Steve Cockram, founder and CEO of Giant. Today, we're going to be talking about communication and the importance of communicating when you're working in a hybrid environment. One of the biggest challenges that all leaders are facing with distributed work and hybrid is communication and better communication. We're talking about HR having just being dumped with all of these people challenges that are completely new with very little resource, and managers who have not had any kind of training, never mind communication training, but no training around how you continue to lead well and manage remotely or with a distributed team. And all of this is going on for for all of our customers. Can you maybe speak to, and I know you've got a book out recently, The Communication Coach, maybe where you would start, so where you might recommend that leaders, managers, whether it's HR or not, just start to determine how they address this challenge.
If you're a vitamin and nice to have, everyone will celebrate you, but everyone still forgets to take their vitamins. But if you have a painkiller, so if you've got a migraine headache or toothache, it doesn't actually matter what it costs, or nobody wants to wait for it, and everyone knows they need painkillers. So the question is when does the people piece become a painkiller? And what you're watching at the moment is you're watching the symptoms of disorientation for human beings, and you're also watching this concept of going mental well-being and health well-being and emotional health and well-being. So wellness has found its way at least into the HR agenda, but I don't think they've connected the dots of why hybrid, or particularly home working, is another piece of the puzzle that actually contributes probably more to emotional and health and well-being than perhaps we understand at the moment. So any company that wants to be in hybrid long term and also be in the emotional health, wellness, and what we would call relational intelligence, you have to think through how your people interact in a meaningful way. And I would always say to people, you need to have a weekly, monthly, quarterly, yearly strategy for how you are going to enhance and develop relational connection and trust that really doesn't get built on a screen. Screens maintain it. It's amazing how productive we can be on a screen, which is why I think hybrid is right in the painkiller for most large organizations, because it means we keep people happy and we also reduce our budget. So we don't need the same amount of real estate space we had before. So we're pushing an open door. I think what's going to happen eventually is people realize that there is a productivity, people health, profit trade-off, which means that people do need to be relationally connected. Now, am I legislating 3 days a week or whatever the government are trying to do over here at the moment? I think it's much better to think about what you do with the time you bring people together. And that's probably more important. So extended relational times. As I said to you, we do a quarterly retreat where we actually have time away together, because it's not so much in the are we doing our work, it's in the micro connections that happen over dinners, over drinks, over lunches, over coffees. So it's the informal is as important as the formal when it comes to relational connectivity, which we would believe is connected to productivity and that sense of I belong somewhere and I have meaning in the relationships I have. Now, that's incredibly complex, by the way. Most HR people are firefighting other fights right now. Yeah. That's not, I don't believe that's yet a painkiller that they can go to the board for budget with. I think it's still a vitamin, but it's coming. Leaders today and people don't need a bigger library. They need a better toolkit, because everyone knows what the issues are. But even when they want to do it better, they don't really know how. And ultimately then, if you think communication is the center of all relational interaction, I can communicate with you in a way that you feel I understand you, that without any tools, you've got literally not even a flick of the coin. You've probably got about a 1 in 5, 1 in 6 chance of anything you ever do being received in the way you wanted it to. If you lead in the way that you were made to lead at your best, you have a far better chance of being successful and enjoy what you're doing. So that the 70-30 principle is if leaders can spend 70% of their time doing by nature what they were made to be good at, they have a much better chance of being successful in everything else. So I would say that's foundational.
So starting with some way, and ideally it's the giant 5 voices. I'm
biased, obviously.
Me too. But starting with some way of managers and leaders being able to communicate with their team in a way that everybody understands, and in a way that allows their unique gifts to be seen and their voices truly heard.
So what people get wrong, in my experience, Helen, is to go, they think that if we're working harder, then that will constantly drive productivity. So in a sense, people's productivity, I think in some ways, hybrid working has a chance to increase people's productivity. But what a lot of people wonder is to go, when we get together, how do we work harder? And what I would say is that actually it's really important that you almost see the gathered time as almost like a precious resource that is far more valuable than you will ever really fully understand, I think. And that actually your objectives for, particularly any time away together has to be very different than perhaps what it used to be when it was just a strategy day, that we did every quarter as a sort of C-suite team or whatever it was. And for me, I would emphasize third gear, which for us is that kind of social mode, where people are actually connecting with one another, that what you're trying to do is your outcome for the day, if you're an HR executive, what's your objectives for the day, actually deepening relational connection and trust actually is as important, in my opinion, as doing all the strategy stuff. Actually, Zoom is a great vehicle for doing strategy at times. I love sending people off into breakout rooms, come back with ideas, working on collaborative documents, blah, blah, blah. Our teams are on permanent, they're around the world, they're on permanent Zoom. It's just left on. They're working on all kinds of pieces of software that are way beyond my particular capability. So when you're thinking of bringing people together, think of it through the lens of relational connection and collaborative learning and work. But don't shorten the lunches, the coffees, the dinners, and the drinks in the evening. So if you're the boss, I would say is you've saved money on maybe you aren't hiring such a bigger space as you used to. Don't just assume all of that is going to fall to the bottom line. You're probably going to have to allocate some of that money to actually making the experiences when we are physically together as amazing as you can make them. I don't believe you can work remotely permanently and not actually suffer both personally and professionally in the process. It just doesn't work. Human beings weren't made for video screen interaction. There's a psychologist friend of mine who said to me, he said, "See, there's a reason why everyone got worn out doing Zoom all day, every day in COVID." Because he said at the heart, in human beings, there is a desire for relational connection. And that actually what Zoom does is creates cognitive dissonance because we see each other and we're excited to see each other. But actually there's a part of us which has we actually know it's not authentic on a screen. And so therefore, we actually get weary in our bones because what we were made for was not 8 hours a day on a Zoom call.
I personally have found this really hard, really hard. And I, so like COVID happened and I was already remote, but had only been remote a few months and I'd never worked remotely before. And then I had a couple of children and I'm now, trying to figure out how I don't spend my whole day like this, because I mean, you know me a little bit, like for most people, like we're talking about, for everybody, it's too much.
Yeah.
For me, it's more draining than I was expecting.
If you think what the Industrial Revolution did in terms of actually moving people from agrarian to city, base for factory work and whatever it is, it took time for them to work out what were the legislations and the rules that allowed people to try and be healthier than they perhaps were. And I think part of the reason why Cadence Giant is an interesting one is because you can't do hybrid without the people piece.
No.
You have to have a people strategy in order to be able to create long-term, sustainability of the process. It doesn't actually mean, by the way, we found it doesn't mean people have to be together all the time. It just means when you are together, it's often for more extended times. And they're a lot more intentional in the relational collaboration space than they are in the classic fifth gear getting work done.
But when I think about some of the conversations I'm having with our customers and folks in the people and HR space who are thinking about trying to support a rhythm of working in and out of the office. So, and ideally this being driven by the team. And we talk a lot about team level agreements and together coming up with what works for the team in terms of a rhythm. Do you have any tips for that? For coming up with that rhythm, I suppose, together, and then also that team time in the office? Because I agree with you, bums on seats and everybody just doing what they could do at home makes no sense when they do come together on that regular basis.
So if you look at the stick piece, which is I want everyone in the office 3 days a week, well, why? Well, because I don't think they're being as productive as they used to be. Or do you have any metrics on that? Not really, but I know they need to be in the office. That's probably those of us who were born, anyone born after 1982 has never known anything of the industrial world. And I think there's a lot of fear in leaders that thinks, well, if I have them in more, they'll get more done. I would much rather actually say, Helen, I'd rather have the whole team in for a particular agreed time. And if everyone's, it might only be 1 day a week. It might be in the sense it's like, but I want everyone there. I want everyone there. Now, some jobs you have to be physically present. It's not possible, but a lot of the work we can do collaboration. So if you said to me, I would probably, if I had the choice, and remember, a lot of teams are in different continents. So it's in IT, it's not possible. But if actually people who used to come into the office every day, because that's what we did before COVID or whatever it might be, I would probably have an absolute core day where actually I would say, I don't mind whether people do some individual work during that process, but we are going to touch base. We are going to review how we're doing. We're going to do some collaborative work. We're going to actually have some social time together. We're going to actually spend time physically with one another. And if all we did was that once a week, genuinely, I believe most teams could be as productive in the saved time of the other work.
As we kind of close this conversation, the thing that's striking me is how many leaders, the senior leadership team, CEO, C-suite, haven't been trained in what we're talking about. And so how can we expect the manager level to have this all figured out in this new world that we're living in? And also, how can we expect them to be constantly suggesting something that's not actually being driven by the C-suite?
Authenticity and vulnerability were not something that we were taught. Why would you do that? So in a sense, it used to be hard enough doing it 5 days face to face. Doing it now where you are, digitally connected, but geographically dispersed for so much of the time, actually the skills of leading and team leadership are harder now than they've ever been. So you've got this huge disconnect at the moment between, the desire of the younger generation for authentic leadership and flatter structures and, greater openness of communication. You have to create an environment where you become comfortable as a leader coming to the world that they live in, because they're never going to come to your world. They don't. It's not a criticism. It's like, how can you expect somebody who's 28 to come to a world they've never lived in? So that's the skill set. So most leaders are tempted to think, well, I'll just keep my head down and just keep working harder. And in a sense, get very frustrated when all the reports that come back and the feedback and the, we found that measuring team health and performance in a metric is the most valuable metric on a dashboard for any CEO. Because we use it. We found that actually, and not because it has to be a stick to beat people with. If you find there's a team which is scoring low, self-selecting low in those metrics of communication, relationship, alignment, execution, capacity, and culture, it basically means every person in that team is a flight risk and there is a productivity issue coming down the pipe. So why wouldn't you go in and see what's going on and why? That to me has been, you ask, how do you measure it? Which is what all sort of CFOs and people do, and go, the overall health of the teams and the individual teams, divisions, regions, wherever it is, I'll guarantee that everything you measure and you want to go up and to the right, the health of a team as they self-assess it is, I believe, the biggest metric that we found that actually you can pretty much hang every KPI you want to measure on. If that's going down, everything tends to go down as well.
I love that. Hybrid teams self-assessing on health.